It's like book club, but it's more than books, and it's not quite a club. Okay, so do we prefer season 1, end of the season, Steve with the nail bat look? Or do we prefer season 5's backwards hat with bandana look? Because personally, most of my priorities when I watch Stranger Things is just to see Joe Keery on screen.
Nail bat 100%. Like, that's what brought me into the world, and that's the impression that I will leave with even 5 seasons later.
It's so funny because I actually, watching season 5, was missing the nail bat. I really was thinking about it. I feel like it haunts the narrative of Stranger Things, and the nail bat was such a good representation of this sort of like ragtag small town fights, like insane monsters energy that, you know, when you get to season 5, they're almost too professional. Yeah, as like a 13, 14-year-old who actively was playing softball, like the nail bat changed something in my brain. And I've never moved on. I'm still at the restaurant. Welcome back to Story Stack. If you haven't been able to tell yet so far, today's episode is Stranger Things themed. We're going to specifically talk about season 5. I have some thoughts. And I know that pre-recording, Lily kind of expressed that she maybe doesn't share those thoughts. Personally, I feel like the finale was gratuitous and self-indulgent. I think that we had so many flashback scenes and really long monologues that we didn't need. Like, I understand this is a 10-year show wrapping up, but I've been here for 10 years. I watched it for 10 years. I don't need flashbacks to season 1 every 5 minutes because I watched that scene. Like, I know what this is referencing. To be fair, it has been so long since season 1 has come out. And I have not watched season 4 since it came out like 2 years ago, was it? I mean, I don't know the exact years and the time in between, but it's been a minute. And
it's been 4 years.
Since
season 4 came out in 2022.
Shut up.
Wait, really?
Yeah. There's actually been so many funny posts of like things that have happened between season 4 and season 5. Like the entirety of The Summer I Turned Pretty, like premiered and finished. Like that whole show happened between the gaps in these seasons.
I mean, not to mention Millie Bobby Brown is married, has a kid. So 4 years, that is crazy. But then now that I think about it, I was watching season 4 and I was in high school and I graduate college this spring. So you're right. You were so right. Stupid. Okay, so then to be fair, they spent 4 years, making a season. Granted, there was a writer's strike in the middle of that too. I don't really remember a lot about what happened. I rewatched the first 3 seasons in preparation for season 4, but for season 5, I didn't have the bandwidth to go through 4 seasons of that again. And I kind of did need the flashbacks maybe a little bit, or at least to remember where we did come from. Like you mentioned the baseball bat, and of course there are memorable moments about that, but we were talking about the snowball earlier. And when I think about the snowball, there's so much of that I just was like, oh wait, that did happen. And I really forgot.
See, and I understand that time has passed and that maybe the audience doesn't remember all of these scenes, but to me, it felt like a nostalgia montage, and I struggled to see the point that these scenes were serving. You know, like I felt like they as in like the writers, the production team, were stuffing it with flashbacks to make us feel all sappy and nostalgic, and instead I'm just frustrated because the pacing of the finale was so all over the place. I mean, we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but just every 5 minutes there's monologue, and the whole time these people are yapping, I'm like, okay, we have the world's ending. What are we doing? Like with Max and Holly in the finale, them like standing in front of their gates and just having that whole speech about, you know, you're Holly the heroic, you're brave enough on your own. The whole time I'm like yelling at my TV, like this has already happened twice. Get through your portal. Like, what are we doing?
I was exactly with you there with the gates being opened, and I mean, maybe could understand it for Max's gate because Holly's gate wasn't there. Like Holly couldn't go through that. And then I could understand Max's hesitation about leaving Holly behind. At the same time, Max was there for 2 years. Girly wants to get home. I don't care. Good luck, Holly, but I gotta go. Like, you got this, girl. Like, I got you this far. You can get the rest of the way. But the second that Holly's gate open, bye. Gone, girl.
Right.
I was going to save my hot take for later in the episode, but I'm just going to come out swinging with it now, is that I think the reason that we're getting these discrepancies of opinions about the finale of Stranger Things, like you got the Ansley side of it, that it was bloated and it focused too much on nostalgia for its own franchise. And then you have Lily over here who's arguing, wait, I actually needed all of that nostalgia to even remember what the hell is going on. I think that whole thing is indicative of a much deeper problem, that these big budget genre fiction TV shows just can't exist in the television environment. Like, there's so many things that, for example, 4 years between season 4 and season 5, obviously there was huge real world issues, COVID, writer's strike, so on and so forth. But these things just can't exist with this much money influxed into them, like to the point that it just causes these weird products.
I'm curious. I want you to expand on what you mean and like they can't exist for television, because I think that there have been shows that have been as big as Stranger Things, but they were handled with more care, and I think the writing was more deliberate. And I don't know. I mean, we were talking about the Percy Jackson show recently on Disney Plus. That's a pretty big budget. Like, they're kind of balling out. Maybe not at the level of Stranger Things, since that one is only at season 2. But I've so far been really enjoying it. And I think that it is pretty well done for TV.
Actually, I agree with you that we have major like genre bending, like genre fiction shows that are these big budget phenomenons that go on forever and ever. Like, I haven't watched Game of Thrones, but like that is wildly successful, uses like a ton of, like, it is fantasy and all that. And it is a show. But I think the thing that makes Stranger Things and even Percy Jackson different, and I think Percy Jackson hasn't gotten to the point yet where this has become too much of an issue, but we are already seeing it season 2. But it starts with children. They are 11 years old. It takes a long time to make a show. Like, unless you are pacing out this show very deliberately, keeping the children's ages in mind, suddenly you're stuck with a 4-year gap. And sorry, 16-year-olds and 20-year-olds look a lot different.
And I mean, if we're using, for example, the Game of Thrones reference, Game of Thrones had this exact same problem. It was an awesome genre-bending cultural phenomenon TV show until it wasn't. Until the season 6, 7 range, where the whole thing came collapsing in on itself. It became too big and too culturally important that everybody just started hating on it. And by the time we got to the final season of Game of Thrones, everybody was just done with the product.
I'm in the same boat as Lily is. Like, I didn't really watch a ton of Game of Thrones. My boyfriend did, so I would kind of like peek in at certain moments. But to my understanding, everybody was, I don't want to say everybody, the majority of people were still on board with Game of Thrones until that show finale, when like kind of the writing went out the window for a lot of characters and their developments. I guess I'm just still lost on what you mean of like, it's not meant for TV. Like, what about that format is limiting these shows?
Well, it's that, because this is the trappings of genre fiction. They have to keep raising the stakes. Like, every season, every episode has to have a new, bigger thing until money can't keep up with it, right? Like, money and time and all of these factors get to your final seasons of Game of Thrones or your final seasons of Stranger Things, where we don't have the freedom to tell this personal, beautiful little self-contained story that Stranger Things season 1 was. No, we have to tie up loose ends. We have to do exposition. Like, world-shattering things are happening and they have to be resolved, and it's all at the cost of telling a good story.
Okay. I would argue, though, that movie series have the same issue. And the problem isn't the fact that it's television. The problem is the fact that when people are creating these stories, they are not having that ending in mind. So when you get there, it's suddenly like, well, shit, like, this is it. Let's wrap it all up. And if you had that ending in mind from the beginning, you could make it fulfilling without all that filler. And I mean, it would be that way with, if you have an 8-movie series, you know, you get to the last movie. If you don't have that last movie in mind from the first movie, that movie could have the same exact, it's just the issue with any like serial narrative. If you just are writing, I don't know, the problem is the writing from the beginning to the end, and you need to have some sort of direction to make it good. Not to say that you couldn't like come up with something super witty and clever where you're like, shoot, we didn't realize we were putting these webs in between our seasons, but I'm seeing the connections now and I can make this beautiful finale. But the best things are things that understand their container. And so many shows, I'm not even saying Stranger Things because I think 5 seasons isn't so outrageous, but so many shows keep going longer than they need to be, to the detriment of the show, where you're just dragging us along at this point. And so no matter what the ending looks like, we're not going to be fulfilled.
And I think that Stranger Things is actually a really good example of that. It was revealed in the documentary that they just put out, like the behind the scenes. They started episode 8, the final episode, without a finished script. They went into production on that episode while they were still writing the script. I started watching the documentary and ended up not finishing it because I was just so frustrated and felt disrespected as a fan to hear them talking about it, to hear things like that revealed. But in the first couple of minutes, the Duffer Brothers are sort of like almost doing a voiceover on some blocking in a scene and explaining that they described it as like, you sort of have this story as this like blob. And then as you work with it, as you like need it, it starts to take shape and you can see something forming and you get really excited about it. And then you like chase it down that way. That's, to me, that is like before you've even pitched the show. That's what you should be doing. Not on set while you're trying to film the scene. Why are we now trying to figure out how this is ending? I would argue season 5, to me, I really enjoyed it until the end. I think that they have always, and they as in the Duffer Brothers, have talked about like knowing where it's going, having this ending in mind. And I think they did to an extent. And then with this time in between, they end up getting lost. Because all of the other seasons, like the way that it went from like small town mystery to like being this big fantasy D&D based story, I know it didn't appeal to everybody, but to me, I could see how we were like jumping genres and getting to the point that we were. The first volume of season 5, those first 5 episodes that came out on Thanksgiving, I loved. I felt like we were getting a little bit back to the feel of season 1 with the mystery, having Henry and like the Mr. What's-It plotline and not knowing what he was doing. The like introduction of new characters. I loved Eric so much. Like these witty little side characters. It felt very reminiscent of Dustin in the first season. I loved the first volume. And then the second volume, in the 2 episodes in volume 2 and then the 1 in volume 3, those last 3 episodes, to me, that's where it started falling apart, because then the pacing got weird. Every 5 minutes there's a monologue. And it almost felt like there were no stakes. Nobody died. And that's not to say that you need character deaths in a story to make it good, but it's that I just never felt like we were actually risking anything. Like it just seemed to all line up so perfectly for them.
You can definitely, say that characters needed to die. I think that they were too precious with their characters. And even the fact that nobody died, what you said about it didn't feel like there were no stakes. It's because we didn't feel like anyone was going to die. They didn't set up character development in this season the way that they have in the past. Like the most character development I would say we get is from Will. And it's kind of cheap. Like Steve is still Steve that he was in season 4. Like there was no big revelations on Steve's part. I understand that Dustin was going through some stuff, but even that wasn't like such a critical point of like he really needed to like figure something out to fully, accept, was it Eddie? Mm-hmm. Eddie's death. Like he he didn't, like, that was not really too big of an issue. Like, we kind of a thing. The biggest one, and I say that with quotes, okay? The biggest one was, like, Will's decision to come out to everyone. And then the people online are very validly kind of just making that a joke. Because that whole thing was a joke. It felt so placed and unnatural, and we've been there. Like, as an audience, we've been knowing that Will likes boys. Like, this is not new information. We didn't need to sit there for 5 minutes with the family. Like, maybe he needed to reveal it to some people. Maybe that was something that was sitting with him, and that was, like, the big fear that Vecna was using. I could totally get that. But as the audience, we didn't need a 5-minute scene. We can understand that he needs to tell the people, and maybe he does, and maybe certain people need to know, but not everybody needs to know. Like, I understand why the mom is important. I can understand why Mike is important. I can understand why Jonathan is important. And I mean, Robin helped Will gain that confidence, so maybe Robin's there too. But
why was Callie in the room? Why was Murray in the room?
Exactly.
Hopper's in the back just hoping, like, why did we need everybody in that room? And to point out, again, Will's coming out scene was longer than the final battle with Vecna. That's what I mean when I say pacing issues. We've spent 3 seasons building up the Mind Flayer. We've spent 2 seasons building up Vecna to defeat them in literally 5 minutes.
And about the Mind Flayer, you're saying, like, they built it up for 2 seasons, but even in season 5, it's not really that built up until we get to the very end, where it's like, oh, ha ha ha, like the Mind Flayer and Vecna are like so intertwined and are actually like this like whole entity together, and so now fight this big thing. And then they do, and they fight it in like 5 minutes. So it's like, okay, we get confirmation that the Mind Flayer is like behind kind of all of this and is the like bigger evil that has infiltrated Vecna's person and made them sort of this like symbiotic relationship between Vecna and the Mind Flayer as like a whole. And we get that confirmation, and you're 5 minutes later, they're both dead-ish. I did really, as far as like that being kind of anticlimactic, whatever, like we've been here for this, and this is it. This is all we get. When we do get to the part where Joyce cuts off Vecna's head, I actually really liked that part of it. Like, I loved this, like, Vecna's still kind of being there, but not so much of a threat. But I loved Joyce being the one to, like, take an axe and just keep hitting. And those were moments where getting those flashbacks did feel purposeful and intentional. Like, as we saw kind of, you know, you maybe kind of feel bad for Henry a little bit in that those final moments. You see that he really was a pawn, just like Will and just like 11. Like, they're kind of these beings that other people want to use and work through. And yes, you get that Henry made the choice to become Vecna and whatever. And we might even think that maybe he didn't have that much control over it. I don't know. It gives him the benefit of the doubt a little much. But then you get to that moment with Joyce and seeing all the things that Vecna has done and all the ways that their lives have been irrevocably changed. And then you're like, no, yeah. Cut this son of a bitch's head off. That's what needs to happen. Like, and it should be that brutal.
No, I enjoyed that part of the scene. And I think that it's still, to me, a bit of a pacing issue. Because if the fight scene had been more drawn out, it felt like there were stakes. I mean, last season, Elle got her ass beat by Vecna. This man has had years on her to like perfect his skill. And he's the template. Like, he's inherently more powerful. And so to have them fight for 5 minutes, and then now we get this flashback scene of like everything that he's done, to me, it almost hammered point the home even more of like, we've spent seasons, this guy's awful, but we beat him in 5 minutes, also with no dialogue. Like, there was no, I don't know. It felt like such a, I feel like we're just adding things to his character in these last, 30 minutes of his screen time. They just, like, with Will's whole coming out, the whole idea of, like, he gets inside your head, he uses things that scare you. We've never seen that. The most that we've seen of Vecna's, like, mind games in season 4, when he's first introduced, like, we see it from an outside perspective. But then when we're with Max and she's, like, trying to break free of it, it's still just within his mind in that, like, weird red realm that she's trying to run from. So, like, why are we adding in now that, like, he just, I don't know. There's so many things where I feel like I could have followed that. If we're gonna pursue this as this idea of, like, Vecna uses your fear to make you feel isolated and make you an easier target, that's cool. But we didn't explore that. We just said Vecna uses what makes you scared when we've never seen that before, and then used it to justify a 5-minute monologue.
Let me ask this question relative to this entire debate. How much of these problems do you think could be attributed to the phenomenon of Netflix writing, aka the whole thing that has been talked about online for a while now, of Netflix changing their original programming so that it can be watched while people are on their phones?
I mean, maybe a little bit, but I feel like this goes back to the fact that they started production without a script. I think it was just they were running with these things that are pacing issues that should have been worked out in the editing process of the final script, but they never got to the editing process because they never had a final script. It was like, it was going as they're filming, they're like coming up with what happens next, And so I think part of it is that they spent the whole volume 1, they had that planned out. And then at the start of volume 2, it started to be a little bit more up in the air as to how these scenes were going to go. And then they just ended up being rushed in the last episode to tie up all of those loose ends.
I have been thinking about this a bit, about the difference between season 1 and then the rest of them. And I understand that in the TV show community, a lot of shows only get one season. So you kind of got to write one good season, and you can't necessarily make it too open-ended unless you are already, like, pre-signed and confirmed for multiple seasons. Like, you can't make it too open-ended or risk people never watching it because they know that the ending sucks and you're never going to get more. But my thought process is, when you do have a book, for example, that you have the intention of making it a series, an agent is going to come to you, and if they want to give you a multi-book deal, they are going to say, hey, what are your ideas for how this series is going to go? And you don't have to stick with it, but you have to have some sort of direction of, like, I see the world expanding this way. I see a new villain here. I see defeat here. Like, a few major things that show, yeah, I can see that this world is going to expand. And lots of books are, like, they tell authors to pitch series as standalones with series potential, because if your first book doesn't sell, no one's buying the second one. So, like, a publishing house isn't going to publish a second one for the series to continue. So your first book should stand alone on its own, generally, unless you have that multi-book deal. But it seems like the Duffer Brothers didn't have a plan past season 1 of, suddenly they were like, well, now we've got this hit show. We gotta now make it make sense. And instead of taking season 1 and making intentional strings all the way to season 5, each season was like a new, let's see what we can throw at the script and see what sticks. They had the chance there to pivot and realize that this is a very engaging world that can expand super far. Here's how we're going to do it. And instead, it felt like they were just fumbling each time trying to figure out what they actually want to do. And then when you get to the end and it's like, what is going on here? It's because they didn't know what was going on here.
I also think something in the wake of season 5 that was so crazy was seeing the Duffer Brothers say that Will has always been the main character, that this was always Will's story. Forgive me for thinking that 11, the face of your show, is not the main character, and then being confused when we sideline her for the entire finale and like rush through her whole character arc this season and then make her kill herself. Like, what do you mean that Will is the main character? Because I think that brings up one of two like huge fails of the show. If Will is your main character, either you completely failed at making him your main character, you sidelined him for 4 seasons and basically just used him as like a Vecna sensor, you know, with his stupid neck thing whenever the upside down's getting close. Or like you started, like you're saying, like you're throwing stuff at the wall and your main character has shifted to Elle because her story is now what people are interested in and trying to figure out what happened to her, with all of the background of the lab and then the military getting involved and like trying to figure out her story, especially as she figures it out. Like she didn't know who she was. And I think that was such an integral part of the plot for a couple of seasons. And then in this last season, trying to like pivot back to like, no, Will's always been our main character. At this point, nobody cares about Will. He hasn't done anything for 4 seasons. And it's nice that like he had development, but I didn't want his development at the cost of everybody else's development. It just, I don't know. I feel like in the gap between seasons 4 and 5, I feel like the writers, the Duffers, like just hit pause and then decided, okay, well now the strike's over. We're probably gonna go back into production soon. Now we can start figuring out what the plot of this season is gonna be, instead of having the concrete idea like you were talking about. I don't know. It was so bad. Like it was so dissatisfying to me, and not just to me, because I can't go throughout this episode without talking about Conformity Gate. This huge theory that episode 8 was a false ending, that there was going to be an episode released on January 7th that was like the actual final episode. And basically the theory argued that Vecna had actually flayed and like taken control of both Mike but also the audience, and that it had been set up to be this crazy fourth wall break where it was, most of the things that I was seeing argued that it started in that like 7-second black screen when Steve falls off the radio tower. And we have the moment of like, that would have been the first real death of the season. That would have kicked off the other like people dying, the stakes being raised. There's 7 seconds of black, and then it comes back in and Jonathan has saved Steve after their like bro moment of like, I was never going to try to steal your girl, man. Like we could have been friends this whole time. Corny ass monologue. Mm-hmm. There were little things like the like dial in the radio tower that they used to shock the Demogorgon. When it's first showed is like completely gray, and then when it's shown again is like gray with red on it. Like the color has changed. People took continuity errors like that and turned it into this whole huge theory that we weren't seeing what was actually happening, that Vecna had messed with the audience. What actually happened was that these are just continuity errors, and that the ending was so unsatisfying that a large portion of your audience genuinely was so in denial that that was how it ended that they convinced themselves there was more. Do you understand how bad your ending has to be for a portion of your audience to like actively be delusional online? That's crazy. It's so bad. I was almost to the point of believing it because there were so many Easter eggs that like seemed intentional. It's so bad.
So I got a first-hand experience of Conformity Gate in my own household, because I watched the finale and I washed my hands of it and I was like, yep, Stranger Things is over. However, my housemate who also watched it was deep down the Conformity Gate rabbit hole. And every day I got updates about so-and-so thing doesn't match so-and-so thing. There was something about the robes being wrong at the graduation, and that was a clue. There was a clock that was stopped at the wrong time, and that was a clue. And anytime that I kept hearing him espouse all of these ideas, it kept sounding more and more appealing, because I was like, yeah, I wasn't satisfied with the ending. However, I kept taking the approach of it that I can't think of any time in any media franchise where a situation like this has happened, because it doesn't even make sense, right? Like, I actually researched this before we started. There's really no TV precedent for this. The idea of making a false ending and then putting an episode in afterward makes zero financial sense. Like, marketing wise, there's so much money spent on marketing that it just wouldn't make sense for your audience to be like, oh, by the way, you missed it, and we're probably not going to get the full audience for the final episode because we already told you when the end was. And with that much just like logic behind how this just couldn't even happen, it really is this fascinating social psychosis to watch so many people just believe that there's something more.
They could have, though. If you're right that there's a lot of money that goes into marketing, I think that if Conformity Gate was real, which I never had that experience because I didn't watch it as the episodes were being released in their installments. I watched it all this last week. But like after the finale aired, Netflix and / Stranger Things could have started teasing something, making sure that that audience would be there on January 7th. You said they thought things were gonna, like, another episode was gonna come out. Like, they could have like kept hinting at something to the point where they're confirming Conformity Gate, and then people would have kept that audience. That audience would have been there at this false ending. It could have been fun. It could have been very cool.
I think it could have been like generational if it was true. Like, a part of me was hoping it was, because I think it's never been done before. And that's why it would have been so cool. And it would have, I think, worked with the world that they have set up. Like, Vecna gets in your mind and makes you see things that aren't real. Like the scene where Hopper shoots Elle in the tank because he thinks that Vecna's there or whatever. And when he pulls her out, like, Elle's not even bleeding. Like, it didn't happen. They've set it up that is possible for Vecna to do. And I think it would have been so cool. I think there were so many cool fan theories going into the finale of like what was going to happen that would have been so much better than the actual ending. One of my favorites is that there was a belief that Will, Kali, and Elle were basically going to like team up, do like a 3-on-1 with Vecna and sacrifice themselves, but take him out in the process, because Elle is obviously 11, Kali was 8, and then Will, as kind of a reflection of Henry, was kind of a reflection of 1. All those add up to 20, and in D&D, like, if you roll a 20, you like, that's an immediate win. Like, you can do whatever. So it would have been so cool for that to have happened, stayed true to like the lore that they've been building the show up on. That would have been such a better ending than what we got. There was also a theory that Henry / Vecna was being controlled by the Mind Flayer, but in a much deeper sense than like how we saw it in the show, that like he was not acting of his own accord type stuff, not just that he had been like brainwashed, and that Will is able through the hive mind to like help break him out of that, and then Henry joins their team. I think that could have been a cooler route to explore. I also think with Henry's character specifically was wildly mishandled this season. They made a play. There was a play in between seasons 4 and 5 called The First Shadow that was like an origin story for Henry. And it expanded more on some of the stuff that they showed in the season, like his time in high school with everybody's parents, him in the cave being exposed to the Mind Flayer particles, and like that whole route. And so while I was watching season 5, like, I was looking up this play to try to understand what was happening, because in the show, I feel like they tease it for so long. And then it's like a quick reveal in the last episode with Will and like with Henry finally going into the cave and like seeing it play out. But then we just gloss over all of it. And I don't understand why you would have separate media while your show is actively still premiering. Your show is not finished, having a spin-off of sorts that reveals the origin for your villain when it hasn't been revealed in the main show yet, but then not make it accessible to your audience either. Because like this, it wasn't streamed, it wasn't recorded and made available. Like, it was just a random, I think maybe 1 month of showings or something crazy in the beginning. I feel like that was another just weird, I don't understand the purpose of that. I don't understand this spinoff. I could see it coming after the show with what we saw in the show and just giving more answers to that. But that was another thing. I was like telling my family some of the stuff from the play, like as we were watching, because they were so confused. And my mom just kept, this is so dumb. Like, why would they make this a separate thing?
A lot of it doesn't make sense. I didn't even know there was a play. So like that just telling you how much they kind of failed in that aspect. If they wanted that to be something important for the plot. Or, I mean, it could have been some of the things like Taylor Swift's Easter eggs, where if you care about it, you know, the people that really, really care are going to know about it and they're going to find it. And so like you give your extra special fans like some special treatment. And then everyone else is still okay because you're fine with whatever the media that does come out. You don't need to find the Easter eggs to enjoy Taylor Swift's albums. But if what you're saying is correct in that play, like kind of would have made the show better for a viewer, then yeah, you need to kind of make that accessible. Also, I'm still stuck on the fact that Will is the main character. I am going to say this, being not nearly as successful as the Duffer Brothers, and I am nothing out actually published in the world. The Duffer Brothers don't understand their protagonist. That's like number one, what you need to know in creating anything. If you think Will is the protagonist, that's not, no. The protagonist is not the one that gets taken and needs to be rescued by the ragtag team. The ragtag team are the main characters, and Will is the damsel in distress. And he's learning things, Will is, but he's 11 is the one that stands out. In that ragtag team, sorry, the cool girl with a mysterious backstory and superpowers, yeah, she's the one we're interested in, duh. And she's the one that starts the show. So yeah, you are telling the audience this is the person you are supposed to follow. And she is the one that we follow. We see her gaining her friendships and her relationship with Hopper and her coming into her own, recognizing her power and the sort of balance of, is she human? Is she kind of this other thing? Figuring out where she belongs with these group of people, falling in love and all that sort of stuff. Will pissed me off. Like not even in this season. Season 5 had so much lack of character development that I wasn't even pissed off by anyone that much. But in other seasons, bro, get out of my face. I don't like you. I actively remember just not caring for Will at all. Like, why are we telling Will anything? The second we learned that he like was connected to a hive mind, why is he in the room? Why was he in the room when they were making the plans? Like in season 5, actually, that did piss me off. Like, Vecna says, you're going to be my spy once again. Okay. Will comes back and knows that Vecna has said this. And sure, Vecna spied. He figured out where Max was, blah, 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 blah. Who's to say Vecna's not still in his mind looking at their plans? By that point, Will should have been like, so maybe keep me in the other room. Sorry, y'all. Can't help you.
That was another huge theory going into the last episode, that it was going to be revealed that Will was still just a puppet for Vecna.
There's a part of me that is very, very cynical when it comes to these kinds of like questions about a huge multimedia franchise property. And the cynical part of me is saying, I wonder if for the first 3 or 4 seasons, obviously, I don't need to wonder, Elle really is the main character. It's an ensemble cast show, but Elle is kind of the main character. The cynical part of me wonders if they did focus testing at some point and they were like, well, Millie Bobby Brown is just not, it's not cutting it for what we need. Pivot, pivot, pivot.
It was just so, I know I keep saying it, it was just such a disappointing ending. To have invested 10 years, all of the production, to have spent that much time making the show, but then as an audience member spending 10 years caring about these characters and making sure I watched every episode as it came out. Like, for all of that to happen and for this to be the way that it ends, it feels disrespectful. Like, I feel like my time has been wasted.
I So you said that you kind of liked the first round of episodes that came out, and then, it just kept getting worse until you get to the finale, and then you're so disappointed. I didn't mind that the end was, almost 50 minutes of resolution after the battle. When you spend that much time on a show, maybe you do want to be indulgent a little bit. And I thought about all the romance books that I've read that give you an epilogue that is like, the protagonist and their children in the future. And it's like not important to the story at all. But the people that really care, they want those indulgent moments of, I want to see you find success. And I like that last 50 minutes or whatever, when you get the graduation, whatever. I like that it ends back in the basement playing D&D. I think it's kind of sweet. I teared up a little bit when they were putting away their notebooks. Now, did it piss me off a little bit that Holly and her friends came down there, and did that feel a little cheap? Yes. Do I really give a shit about Holly? No. But like, I thought that like it coming back to like the campaign and, them finishing a campaign down in that basement, I thought that was super sweet. I even like that they kind of used the campaign as a way to reveal that Elle could still be alive. Now, do I agree with the logic of that? That's another story. But I think that if someone were to figure it out, it should have been Mike, who has always cared about 11. And, him revealing it a little bit to the friends and to the audience was, in that way, super sweet. And the fact that like Elle's D&D character is the thing that like saves their campaign too, I think is super sweet. And in a way, like, she's still with them. But Elle was like the one death we got, and they couldn't even commit to that, which is also kind of bothersome. Like, either confirm that Elle's alive or not, but don't be like, well, we kind of killed Elle. She's kind of dead. And then logically you think, well, the way that you set it up, she should be dead. Like, why? Kali was dead. Elle wouldn't have left Kali even half alive. Elle didn't know that the military was going to come get them with those, like, power towers. Like, why would Elle need Kali alive? And if Kali was alive, Elle would have taken her with them because they would have, wanted to, like, help her heal. They wouldn't have known that they would need Kali in this secondary location to, like, protect her against the military and cast an illusion. Also, we have no reason to believe that Kali kind of has those abilities to cast such an intense illusion from so far away. Also, having no idea what's actually going on. Like, how was she supposed to know when to cast the illusion? How to, like, because she was dying, how to spend her energy. It doesn't make sense. And if Kali was alive and gonna spend her energy anywhere, why wouldn't it have been to destroy Vecna when Vecna was still alive at that moment? I don't know. It doesn't make sense. Do I want Elle to be alive? Yeah, because killing her felt cheap too. Her going all this way just to sacrifice herself in the end in this very unnecessary way felt cheap. And the fact that Dr. K is like this secondary villain, what? Like, we don't get enough of her. Like, either make her to be this, like, bigger thing or don't, because she's the reason that Elle had to die. And we don't even, what was she there for? I get that she was trying to, like, start this big military project or whatever, but that was such a non-issue with Vecna, like, destroying the world, that I didn't give a shit about her science projects.
I think going back to the resolution part of it, I know that like an audience likes to see, the future when they have kids and like how it's wrapping up and all of that. I liked going back to D&D. I liked that being the final real thing. I really liked Holly. I thought she was so cool throughout the thing. Her like bashing that girl's face in with the radio when she was like still trapped. I laughed so hard, but I see what you mean about it feeling a little corny. That was the resolution to me. Everything else was gratuitous and unnecessary. I don't even think Robin has ever she had like one conversation with Nancy. I don't think that she's ever interacted with Jonathan. So why did we need a 5-minute montage of them sitting on the rooftop drinking beers? Has she ever talked to Jonathan? Ever? Why are we acting like they're best friends all of a sudden? And then at the graduation when Mike shows up late and Karen like runs up to him and has this whole moment. We didn't need that. That's what I mean. Like, I don't think we needed any of that. I think that in the D&D scene at the end, when Mike is sort of walking through what happens to all the characters, that's when we see what happens when they end up in the future. That should have been it. Because even when you have an epilogue in a book, it doesn't take up half the book, you know? And that's what this did. When they killed Vecna, there was still 45 minutes, 50 minutes in the episode. That's half. Like, what are we doing? Why did we rush through the climax of killing our main villain just to then spend the next 50 minutes having like a nostalgia fest?
Not to mention killing Vecna and killing the Mind Flayer was so combined that, you know, you theoretically have these two terrifying villains. And I get that they've made it sound like they rely on each other, but it sounds like the Mind Flayer was doing just fine without Vecna. And then when he got Vecna, it was just like another vessel to use and a more powerful vessel than the Mind Flayer could have imagined. But the Mind Flayer to me was supposed to be like, oh, we've seen Vecna as this big bad and can't destroy him. And now there's this thing that's even worse than Vecna that's actually controlling Vecna. That should be an even more insurmountable. Like, you thought you had to fight the impossible, but turns out the impossible is just the step to the actual impossible. And instead they were like killed in the same 5 minutes together at the same time. You're right. That was kind of so unsatisfying there. But I've been unsatisfied from the first few episodes. The ones that you said that you liked, the writing was bad. I was not into like any of the conversations that the characters were having. Didn't feel like they were taking me anywhere meaningful. And I saw something that was like, ChatGPT must have written this. Now, I don't think the Duffer Brothers were like
in the documentary.
They said they used
some
it.
People, they didn't say they used it, but some people have like zoomed into a screenshot of his laptop and there's like 3 tabs of ChatGPT open while he's writing the script.
Well, I'm going to say this. Any writer who gives a crap about their craft isn't using ChatGPT to actually form the creative content of things. And I'll stand by that. They're not using any AI if, you know, you actually have like integrity for your work. But I saw something that was like, all the goddams are just such a sign of it being ChatGPT, which I hadn't thought about that at all. But after I saw that, all I could hear was goddamn in every other sentence. And I'm like, okay, at this point, it is getting a little excessive here. It does feel cheap. This doesn't feel like, and everyone's saying it. So it's like, what happened to characterizing through dialogue? All the dialogue felt the same. It wasn't like, oh, that's a line that Nancy would say. That's a line that theoretically works with the line that came before it.
Yeah. I also think too, something of just like, I don't know if it's a bad writing issue or just a continuity error or what it would fall under, but the fact, okay, it was obviously predictable by the time that they revealed it that the Upside Down was a wormhole. Mm-hmm. We knew that was coming. I wasn't necessarily upset with the reveal. I thought it was a cool direction to take it, but the fact that it just stops being scary, where were the Demogorgons? Where were the Demobats? Where are all of the crazy creatures that have like attacked people the second you step foot into the Upside Down, which is why we spent 4 seasons feeling like this was a bad place. Why did it just become like a weird negative version of Hawkins?
Yeah, it didn't make sense to me how the military was so easily able to set up like a whole ass establishment in the Upside Down.
The fact that like these teenagers are just doing these crawls like once a week, going through the Upside Down. What are we doing? This used to be like you you would send somebody in there as a punishment to die. Like it was an execution. Why are we taking field trips? Why did we bring the science teacher into the Upside Down? What are we doing?
This whole situation, I think there's some parallels. It kind of reminds me of the new Star Wars movies, the sequel trilogy, in the sense of like we had Episode 7, The Force Awakens, which was a pretty by the numbers Star Wars movie, but it worked pretty well because that's what people wanted. Then you get Episode 8, which directed by Rian Johnson, and it is just this insane departure from Star Wars. It's absolutely crazy, just for the frame of reference of the entire franchise. And then you get Episode 9, which practically just exists to wrap up loose ends. And I couldn't help the entire time that I was watching Stranger Things, like feeling like the exact same thing was happening. Of this narrative of season 5 doesn't need to exist as its own piece of story. It needs to exist as a way to just wrap things up.
Yeah, I don't necessarily feel like they planned on ending with season 5. And without the 4-year gap, they might have gone longer. But because of that 4-year gap, Millie Bobby Brown has a child. She's like, girl, I'm not doing this anymore. Let her go let her be free. You can only hold your cast members hostage for so long with a show before they've got to grow up and go do other things. And so because they planned on, I think planned on was having more than season 4. And then they came to the realization of, well, I think we're only going to get one more season. With that 4-year gap, they were like, this is all we get. So instead of like, but they couldn't end with season 4 because they clearly left a lot of like things open for there to be more stuff that happens in the world. So that wasn't an ending. So they need to have an ending. So there needs to be at least one more season. And then 4 years in between, at least one more season turned into, we only get one more season. No one else we're not getting the other people to sign on for more seasons. This is kind of dragging on too long. And our kids are growing up. They're going to have to graduate. And like, you can't, this is the sort of story that you can't extend too much.
Big ups to Finn Wolfhard for that one interview that he did where somebody asked him who cried the most at the Stranger Things season 5 finale. And his answer was, our agents. Raw line.
I would say too to that though, kind of going back to earlier with the problem of using child actors is that they grow up, and then I think that's something that modern audiences kind of just know to overlook. And in a story like this where the plot doesn't necessarily hinge on them being the age that they're supposed to be, you know, like that's the added effect of like these are a bunch of kids running around saving the world is there, but it's not the primary plot point of their ages. Like it's not a high school story, you know? And we've seen adults play children since the beginning of time. Like there's always, especially like early 2000s sitcoms and stuff of high schoolers casting people like in their 30s to play a 16-year-old. I think that's something a modern audience can look over. A part of me wishes, because the time jump in the beginning of this season, I understand that with the fact that there was 4 years, it would seem necessary to have a jump sort of similar in the show of 2 years. But we ended season 4 on the shot of them like looking out over Hawkins with the smoke rising up. Vecna has like torn rips in the world. And then we just start season 5 jumping past that. We're like, it's been 2 years. The military's here. We live in a quarantine state. Like we're vibing. We're still going to school. We have job. A part of me wishes that there was not a time jump in the show and that we as an audience just were kind of forced to overlook the fact that they're older and pick up from that moment. I think the stakes are huge, but then it gives you time to like immediately jump into it. You know what I mean?
Or they could have done the time jump, but just in a different, more tasteful way, because they do definitely look older. And I agree that we've been overlooking, you know, adults playing children for a long time. This is nothing new. But I mean, beyond the fact that we're looking at them and they're older, they're adults. Like they're growing up as people. Like, they don't want to be stuck doing Stranger Things forever too.
Yes and no, because Millie Bobby Brown specifically has done a lot of interviews about how hard it was for her to accept that this was the end and that she wasn't ready to let go of Elle. I mean, with how much we're talking about how unsatisfying the ending is, I can't imagine how these actors felt being attached to these characters for 10 years and then reading this as the end. It's giving Amelia Clark with Daenerys all over again. Like, I can't imagine how heartbreaking and frustrating it was for them. You know, there was a clip of Winona Ryder on Hot Ones where she was like eating the hot wings, you know, and at one point she's kind of laughing. She's like, I think I'm in Stranger Things season 5. I haven't seen it. I don't know. Like, I think everybody involved in that show from a cast and crew department was so irritated with how it was being handled. I think that they would have signed on for another season to have a better ending for all of their characters.
Well, to take Finn Wolfhard's quote into account, I think they would have signed on for another paycheck.
Yeah.
I think this is a good place to kind of wrap it up and ask around, like, what, now that Stranger Things is over, this huge cultural phenomenon, we've been with it for 10 years. Like, what does it mean personally to you? I can say my answer here, which is pretty lame, is that it truly didn't have that much impact on my life. Like, I watched season 1 when it came out, and I loved it. And I think everybody did. It was huge at the time. And it was this self-contained story about childhood and nostalgia and fear of things unknown, and it resonated with me. Every expansion beyond it, like, I watched all the seasons, and it really went in one ear and out the other.
Yeah, I mean, I think 10 years is a significant chunk of our lives as an audience watching these people, but I don't know. I mean, was I listening to Kate Bush a lot when season 4 dropped? Yeah.
We all were.
Yeah, you know, I fell victim to that. I know I talked about it earlier, but I also grew up 20 minutes from Jackson, Georgia, which is where they filmed all of like the town square sequences. So I've been to all of the cool like shooting locations. I've done those things, but I don't know that anything from the show is going to leave like a lasting effect on me, if only because of how unsatisfying this ending is.
I wouldn't have watched season 5 if it wasn't even for you two. So it's not even a fact of season 5 was so bad that it's not going to have an impact. For me, after the first 2-3 seasons, I might even give it, you know, I was kind of done. Season 4 didn't impress me much. It kind of felt like season 5, but maybe done a little better. I loved season 1 when it came out. I was obsessed with the vibe that they were pulling together, and the spookiness and the scariness of the upside down, and this idea of an upside down was so cool. Yeah, this is not, I mean, I don't think that I'll ever rewatch season 5 again. Maybe I'll watch season 1 again, but I don't want more out of Stranger Things.
Too bad there's more coming. There's an animated TV show coming,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
There's a ton of rumors that we're getting a Nancy Wheeler spinoff.
I won't be there.
I won't
done.
be there either.
Yeah.
Nancy's great, but what?
Yeah.
I need whatever Elle is doing. Sorry, she's the one that I cared about. And then you killed her, kind of.
Yeah, I think overall, if nothing else, Stranger Things is a lesson to writers on what happens when you start a story without an ending in mind. Mm-hmm. I think if nothing else comes from this, and I do think there are other things to come from it. I mean, they casted a whole bunch of unknowns in season 1 that are now established actors, I think, and some of them are truly like very talented. I know I talked about Joe Keery right in the opening for his looks, but I do think that man is so talented. I love his music, and I would question if we would have had that if it wasn't for Stranger Things. But yeah, overall, I mean, it's just, you can't start a story without knowing where you're going with it.
And also, I want to say, let it be known, Netflix can make good stories. I have so many like things that Netflix has created that I have thoroughly enjoyed. So if Netflix ever wants to adapt anything that I write, just know that this is not a hit on Netflix. Actually, please adapt whatever I write, please. Thank you.
Lily's clearing out her digital footprint right now.
You actually really have to appeal to the overlords, because the way it's looking right now, it's looking like Netflix is going to buy out HBO, the Time Warner catalog. So they're straight up going to be our new overlords soon.
I really hope, because the It show, Welcome to Derry, they have announced a second season, but that's part of the things up for grabs in this Netflix buy. And I'm so scared that Netflix is going to ruin it, because the first season of that show is so good.